I have 9 o'clock.
I have
Are you ready?
8:59. I have 8:59.
Oh,
Are you one of those people, Mr. Kaufman, who sets their clock a little fast so they're never late?
no, I said it slow so I don't have to get there.
Okay, Iris, would you please mute your phone?
It is muted. It was.
All right, before I call this meeting to order, there are a few comments on the teleconference that if we're disconnected for more than 15 minutes, we'll resume it today at 1 o'clock. And any citizens wishing to be heard on the agenda, the citizens to be heard can call in. We'd ask them to please mute their phones. And then I'd ask all participants except the trustees keep their phones on mute until they're recognized to speak. All right, I will call the meeting to order. Our June meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. I don't have any items from the chairman as yet. Do we have any citizens to be heard? If not, then I would have approval of our minutes of our May 1st meeting. Any corrections or additions or questions?
Mr. Chairman, can I mention that you might want to tell people to use *6 to unmute in the event that they wish to speak?
Okay, I thought I said that, the participants to mute their phones on *6. I guess we need to take a voicemail roll call. Is that correct?
I don't think so. I think that we're all on.
Okay.
Yes, everyone can vote online.
Okay.
Need to call, Mr. Chair, need to call for a motion and a second.
It's been moved and seconded. Motion's approved. All right. We've got quite a lengthy consent docket. The only item that I would like a brief conversation is actually item N, but the majority of all the consent dockets are just approval of amendments to all our different contracts. And so I don't, unless any of the trustees have any questions on any of those particular items, then I'd ask Jason just for a brief comment on item N.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, item N is an MOU with Oklahoma Department of Transportation, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, or ACOG, the region's MPO, in the city of Norman. And the purpose of the MOU is essentially part of the federal regulations, guidelines related to federally funded projects require a coordinated planning effort. And that coordinated planning effort needs to be between the MPO, the state, and then any of the transportation providers. And so those entities have had that MOU in place for a number of years, with CART in Norman being the transportation provider in Norman. Now that CART is no longer providing public transportation, and rather the city of Norman is directly through an agreement with us, the MOU just needed to be updated to basically replace CART with the city of Norman. So that's really the reason for needing to update the MOU.
All right, thank you. Any questions by any of the trustees? Do I have a motion to approve our consent docket? We have a motion and a second. Everybody vote, please. Motion's approved. We've got quite a few items on the on our individual considerations. And if everybody would look at item H, I would like a motion to move that to the first item on our individual consideration so we can get a little discussion. I don't think we need to go into executive session because I understand all the trustees have been kind of updated on this. So unless any questions, then I would have a motion to move item H to the first of our individual consideration.
I would move that.
I'll second it.
And go ahead, Mayor.
Hey, Chris.
Trustees, we're having technical difficulties pulling up item H. So we have that trustee Johnson made a motion and trustee Bryant seconded the motion for item H and hearing it separately. So now we just need to record the verbal vote, please.
Lisa, you need to call roll.
Okay. So Chairman Kaufman? Chairman Kaufman, A. I wonder what. Where's Chairman Kaufman? Okay. Trustee Sepner,
Yes.
Trustee Bryant,
Yes.
Trustee Cooper.
Yes.
Oh, here. Trustee Greenwell,
Yes.
Trustee Ruiz,
Aye.
Trustee Hill,
Yes.
and Trustee Johnson.
Yes.
Again, I'm going to ask for Chairman Kaufman. Are you present? We lost him. In light of the situation that Chairman Kaufman is not on the call, Vice Chairman Sepner, you now need to preside over the meeting, please.
Okay. And we have just made a voice call vote for the item H. Is that correct?
What we made the roll call vote for, Barney, was to move item H to the beginning of the items for individual consideration.
Okay, then we have voted to do that. So we will go ahead and hear from Jason on an explanation of this item under consideration.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chairman. So this item is a resolution approving an agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 993 and authorizing the administrator to execute that agreement. So just a few background details for the trust, and I know I've had an opportunity to speak with many of you individually about this, but as you'll recall, we negotiate with the ATU a collective bargaining agreement every 3 years. And so fiscal year 20 was the beginning of the next 3-year agreement. So we have basically spent this fiscal year negotiating the terms of the next 3-year agreement that is being presented to the trust today. And a couple of highlights from the agreement, particularly with regards to financial impact, is with the agreement being approved, it would allow for a 4% pay plan adjustment, a one-time stipend of $500, some changes to some of the various incentive pays that are already in the contract, along with a new premium pay, and then really setting the stage for the next 2 years. There are some provisions to open the contract back up for negotiations in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 21, certain conditions have to be met. Fiscal year 22, we have agreed to open back up for negotiations. There's nothing that commits the trust other than just agreeing to negotiate. So with that, the estimated financial impact of this agreement to the current fiscal year, and I realize we're almost through the current fiscal year, but this agreement is retroactive, so it will go all the way back to July 1st. The financial impact is estimated to be around $615,000. And when we get to the financial report, you'll notice that we do have savings so far this year in our expenditure budget. And of course, part of that is really just a factor of knowing we were going to have some negotiations and some wage impacts that haven't hit yet, but they will if this contract is approved. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
I understand Chairman Kaufman is back online. Is that correct? I saw him.
I don't see him. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Jason, it seems like given the technical difficulties, it might be easier for us to vote on this in the normal spot on the agenda unless any of the other trustees object to that. Francis, do you have any reason that we shouldn't do that?
No, I think that's a very good suggestion, Laura. That would work.
And the other trustees object to that, I would say it might be better to leave it in the normal order.
Well, that's fine. I had cleared it with legal that we could do this, but we can just leave it at that then.
I'm sure that legally it's fine. It's just in the technology, we're not able to really accommodate that, appears.
All right, good. Then let's go to item A, and that is Streetcar Safety Consultant and authorize the administrator to advertise and release the request for proposal.
Right. So with approval of this item, it is essentially allowing staff to go ahead and advertise the scope of work and request an RFP from those that are interested in proposing. Does not obligate the trust any financial impact at this time. The reason we're requesting authorization to issue this RFP is primarily to help us with our auditing, our independent auditing that we need for our safety plan that you'll hear a little bit about later in the agenda. So the scope of work primarily relates to auditing our safety plan, but also gives us the flexibility to add task orders, if you will, for consultant work that falls outside of auditing. And to give you just an example of where a task order type project might come into play is, let's say, for example, working with our partners at the state, we determined there was a certain corrective action plan that was needed. We could, if needed, have the consultant help us develop that corrective action plan or review the corrective action plan. So really will just be, kind of an extension of staff in that sense as well. So That's really it with this item. I'm glad to answer any questions on it.
All right. Any questions? Then I have a motion to approve item A.
So moved. This is Trustee Greenwell.
Okay, second.
Second.
We're doing this online now.
It's moved and seconded in the Prime Gov.
All right. I don't see that on my screen. But all in favor?
I may have to give a verbal vote. I'm sorry. to mess with
Councilman
that.
Greenwell, it is showing in our system that you have voted. Yes.
Well, thank
You
you.
made the motion. Yeah.
Okay, well, then the motion passes.
Okay.
All right. Item B is a change order to the Ferry landing. And I don't know, we could combine item C. It was another change order, so maybe you might just cover both of them at the same time. Jason.
Yeah. Yes, I'm glad to. So items B and C are both change orders related to capital projects we have initiated along the Oklahoma River. As you know, we're building a new landing at Agnew, which we're referring to as the Stockyards Landing. That is item 6B. We're also building a permanent structure for the Meridian Landing. That's item 6C. And we do have change orders affecting both of these projects. For the Stockyards Landing, we have a $30,234 change order. This is change order number 1. And the reason for the change order is we need to relocate a main irrigation supply line. Basically, the line goes, right through our project right now, knowing that in the future, there'll be, maintenance that might be needed to that supply line. We want to reroute it around our project so that, our project doesn't have to be, dug up or something to that effect in the future. So, so this change order would allow us to relocate that main irrigation line. Again, the increase is about a 2.79% increase to the overall project. As a reminder, this project is funded primarily by federal grants, and the completion date of the Stockyard Landing is expected to be July 18th. As I mentioned, item 6C, this is the permanent structure at Meridian, and this is a change order of $31,141, or actually about 9.5% of the contract amount. And what we're doing here is we're constructing and removing a temporary trail. As you know, the trails along the Oklahoma River get used quite a bit, particularly in the warmer months. And so since this project is going to go all the way through November, and as we know, sometimes projects get extended, could go into December, we felt like it was important to keep the trail open. And so that's why staff is recommending we go ahead and construct this temporary trail so that users of the trail system can get around the project while we're building the permanent pavilion. Again, funded primarily by federal grants, and expected completion date at this point is November 14th.
All right. If there's no questions by any of the trustees, I'd have a motion to approve item B. I can't see on my screen how to vote, so I'll vote verbally, I guess. Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you click escape, it may give you the voting window.
Let me get some help. Just a minute. Chair?
Councilman Greenwell, would you like to cast a verbal vote?
I can't get the screen to vote.
I think.
Tell us again how we get the screen to vote.
Hit escape.
Okay, if you press escape, usually it gives you the split screen. Did you register in PrimeGov when you came back into the meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I suggest you continue with the voice vote for Greenwell and Kaufman.
Well, no, I'm back. I can vote now. We found it. Is there a second?
So we do have a first by
Okay.
trustee Bryant and a second by trustee Sentner.
Okay, all in
Councilman
favor?
Green? Councilman Greenwell,
Yes, I'm sorry. I'd like to vote yes.
thank you.
And I will vote yes. All right, thank you. And then item C, do we have a motion to approve item C? Okay, I see we do that. All in favor say aye, or voice vote yes.
Greenwell, aye.
Kaufman, aye.
Please, Councilman Hill, sorry.
Okay, motion passes. All right. Item D, and I don't know if we need any discussion. It's just a small increase in the accepted maintenance bond on the CNG fueling station. And so I think unless any of the trustees have a question, I would have a motion to approve item D. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Kaufman, aye.
Greenwell, aye.
Councilman Cooper, did you cast? Thank you.
All right, the motion carries. Item E is a resolution approving the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan for the streetcar and authorized implementation of the safety management program. And I think we have a brief presentation by our Chief Safety Officer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will turn it over to Eugene Fritz, Chief Safety Officer. And let me get our presentation up here first. How's that? Are you able to view the presentation?
I can see it.
All righty. Here we go.
Oh, thanks, Jason. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So the first slide here is, so 49 CFR 673 mandates that the Rail Transit Agency, embark, we have to have a public, a safety plan. So the key components to this is the FTA has adopted principles and methods of a safety management system. And 673, like I said, requires OKC Streetcar to develop a agency safety plan. So under 673, it needs to be approved by the State Safety Oversight, which is ODOT. They did that back on May 18th. And the accountable executive, Jason, he approved it on May 28th. And it also needs to be approved by COTPA's board, which is what we're doing today. So the compliance date for this is July 20th, 2020. So it's required to be done by next month. So it's a little bit busy slide here. So up in the upper left, 2 boxes over to the right, 2 down. So 49 CFR 674 designates that each state has to have a state oversight. So it's ODOT in our case. So I'm just going to take you all the way down to the bottom right. So ODOT came up with a program standard, which is now state law. So our safety plan must meet the requirements of ODOT's program standard. So which it does because ODOT has approved it. So to get there, it was a lot of work with working with ODOT, working with ODOT's consultants, Molly, Jesse, me, Jason, all working together, all to get to the end point there. So just a brief timeline. So back in July of 2019, the FTA issued 49 CFR 673. So that's when it became law. If you remember back in October of 2019, that's when Molly did the presentation to the board. At the time, it was before the PTASP, it was called an SSPP. So under the 673, it's required to be a PTASP. That's when Molly did that presentation. So we're going to be required to do that every year. And then we're going to be required to bring it to the board for board approval every year. So in April of this year, April 22nd, 2020, the FTA issued a notice which they were not going to enforce the compliance date of July 20th. They extended to December 31st of this year. With that, we still met the July 20th date. So some of the roles and responsibilities. So under the SMS, it's a top-down approach. So being the board is at the top, there's some roles and responsibilities. So number one, promote safety as a core value. Help reinforce a culture that includes a focus on safety. Support the accountable executive to ensure resource allocation for a strong safety management system, and approve the PTASP annually. So we'll be doing this every year, and we'll probably have a meeting, before this to kind of go over any changes or anything like that with the PTASP. So moving forward, so this is my favorite slide here. So safety is everyone's responsibility. So, this was kind of a cliche in the safety world, but under SMS, it makes each department responsible for safety. So each department will be required to monitor safety in their own departments, and that all kind of rolls up and feeds up into the safety department. Further promote a culture of safety. So we have employee reporting systems. So we have our open door policy. We also created a web portal where employees can go on to and report any safety concerns. So the big thing with employee reporting, we want to make sure we're able to close that loop and to give feedback to the employees as to what they reported on. And number 3 here is Geographic Information System, GIS. So this is technology that goes into, we use a software called ArcMap. So the first one here is intersection evaluation. So Jason and I had a meeting with Trustee Cooper and Councilwoman Hammond. And from that meeting, we determined that we're going to do intersection evaluations along the streetcar alignment to start with. So with this system, the GIS will be able to plot this on the software. So we'll have a map of all the intersections. Each intersection will have a rating from all 4 directions, and we'll know what to do with each intersection. I just see the camera now. Sorry. We'll be able to see the hazards of each. We'll be able to rate each intersection as a hazard and what to do to help mitigate that and make it a safer intersection. And then with SMS, it kind of translates over into the bus side as well. So with using the same system, the mapping system, we'll be able to do evaluations of our bus stops and map those into the software as well. So we'll basically have a map of all our bus stops, and each bus stop will have a hazard rating, and then we'll be able to mitigate those hazards to make the bus stop safer. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, any questions by the trustees? Okay, well, thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve item E. I see it moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Kaufman, aye.
Greenwell, I.
Vice Chairman, would you like to cast a vote?
Oh, mine says waiting. So,
Would you like to cast a verbal vote?
yes, I vote aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes. Item F is authorizing the administrator to establish an Oklahoma City streetcar park and ride program to provide 2 free streetcar ride or two customer streetcar rides for anybody with a valid parking transaction from any of our parking garages.
Yes, this is a new program that we're presenting to the trustees for consideration. We think it will have benefits both to the parking system in terms of hopefully incentivizing people to park in COTPA garages over other parking locations so that they can ride the streetcar at no cost for that day that they are parking. But then also help introduce more people to public transit, specifically the streetcar, and assist in developing ongoing ridership with the Oklahoma City streetcar system. So as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the way it basically works is with proof of pulling a parking ticket, if you will, from a COTPA garage, that essentially would be the proof of fare for riding the streetcar. And that would allow 2 people to be able to ride the streetcar for free if they park in a COTPA parking garage. And this is a pilot program that we're asking the trustees to consider. We plan to operate it for 6 months, report back, and then determine if we A, want to continue it, or B, if it is successful, potentially put it in as a long-term program. So with that, I mean, I'm glad to answer any questions, but I think it's pretty straightforward. But again, another tool we can use to help people learn how to use public transit. And again, really get around downtown with only having to park once.
All right, well, I think it's a great idea and I hope it does work. So any questions? If not, I'd have a motion to approve item F. I have a motion and second. All in favor say aye. Kaufman, aye.
Greenwell, I.
Motion passes. All right, item G, which is maybe our longest item, but maybe we can, since all the trustees have been kind of had a presentation on this, but that's our 2021 budget and directing the administrator to implement and administer the budget. So Jason and everybody has a copy of the proposed budget in their folder by each department. So.
Yes, I'm glad to share a few comments. And again, to your point, Mr. Chairman, I think this will be the 3rd time the budget has been shared publicly and or discussed publicly within the last 4 days. So I'll try to keep my comments pretty brief and then glad to answer any questions. But the overall takeaways for the budget are this. I mean, we understand in the current economic environment, all city departments and the trust notwithstanding, really we're required to make some budget reductions, short-term adjustments for that matter, but some budget adjustments for the next fiscal year to be able to deliver services with a balanced budget. So for the COTPA budget overall for 2021, you'll see we're looking at a budget just under $44 million. That's a reduction of around 2.9 million, or about a 6.2% reduction. So overall, we're looking at about a 6.2% reduction on the budget. Some of the motivating factors we had in developing this budget was really on the transit side, trying to retain our essential transit services at their current levels while, unfortunately needing to temporarily suspend some of our alternative modes of transit during the next fiscal year. So what that means is bus and streetcar transit service are really not going to be negatively impacted, and the budgets for both of those operations are relatively flat. Our bike share operation and our river operation, on the other hand, their budgets are significantly reduced. You can see the numbers in your packet there, but an 89% reduction on Spokie's budget, an 80% reduction on the Oklahoma River budget. And that's because we do plan to suspend service temporarily for 1 year. So that's really where we're at on transit. With parking, as you know, the parking system essentially is self-sustaining financially. We pay for the expenses and the maintenance of the garages through the revenues that the system generates. There is no general fund money that goes into the parking system. So our revenues, our budget, they fluctuate with the economy and our customer base. And unfortunately, with the current economic environment, we are looking at a substantial decrease in projected revenues for next year. Our parking budget is set at just a little over 4.6 million. That's about a 1.2 million reduction from the previous fiscal year, or essentially about a 21% reduction. So overall, the takeaway on the parking budget is we're expecting about 20% less in revenue in the coming year than what we had budgeted in this fiscal year. Now, the takeaway on the parking budget is we have been in a very fortunate situation with our parking operation, where we've been able to budget excess revenues well in excess of our expenditures, and put those over in our capital reserves. So this year alone, for example, I believe we had we had just right at $1 million budgeted to transfer to capital. So because we're seeing such a projected decline in our revenues, although we still intend to be able to cover our expenses with our revenues, it's unlikely we're going to be able to put any money in capital reserves next year. So the biggest impact of the budget on the parking side is a reduction in revenues and a reduction in the amount we're able to transfer to capital reserves. So with that, I'm glad to answer any additional questions you might have about the budget. We'll share with you that during the Finance Committee meeting yesterday, I did get into a few details on some of the adjustments we had made to specific revenues, like fare revenues and some of our parking revenues. But again, I won't go into detail again since we visited about that yesterday.
Hey, Jason, this is
Yes,
David
sir.
Greenwell. I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
As it relates to the parking and employees of the city of Oklahoma City, do we charge them? Does COTPA get paid for their parking services?
So for the city employees that
park in the parking garage?
Yes. In fact, the city is one of COTPA's largest contracted monthly parking customers.
And the rate that we charge, is comparable with the rates that we charge others?
It is, yes. We charge the standard rate in our fee schedule for the Sheridan Walker parking garage and the Arts District parking garage.
Okay.
And I don't have it in front of me, but you'll remember our rate schedule is tiered. So based on the number of parkers, the price adjusts a little bit. But most of the city parkers are in the Sheridan Walker garage, and that is a slightly less cost per month than Arts District. But the city pays what is on our fee schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Then I'd have a motion to approve item G, adopting our 2021 budget.
Greenwell, I.
Do we have I can't see, have we had a motion and a second?
Our chairman, the screen has locked up, so can we please take a verbal vote?
Okay. Well, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second by Greenwell.
All in favor, say aye. Kaufman?
Also, I just wanted to say something that I will speak to at a larger level when council resumes to consider the overall budget on the 16th. I said this on Tuesday as well, and I just wanted to make all of my fellow trustees aware where my struggles are right now with this budget. I always am, unless something like drastically changes, will always just be proud of the work that Jason does as our administrator. I'm having a really difficult time with the entirety of the budget this year, like a very difficult time with it. And it's not a reflection on the city manager, and it's not a reflection on Doug Dowler. It's, for me right now, and I applaud some of the efforts that are going on, discussions about Spokies, but, to me, just seeing something like that, removed right now is it's a painful cut to me as someone who throughout every single day of this shelter in place has rode my bike from Paseo to Scissortail Park for my mental health and my physical health. And I do that at the end of every workday, whether it was grading essays, working with my students online, doing council responsibilities, trying to respond to this historic pandemic. And there would be times I would see folk on Spokie's bikes, I'm guessing doing similar work that I was, mental health and physical health work. And I know people rely on our bikes to sometimes get to work, finish that first and last mile. And this is, again, not to fault anyone at the city level, but I am deeply concerned by what I would consider the lack of inaction at the state and federal level. I am very proud of the two financial relief bills that our congressional delegation supported because that's how we're getting this CARES funding. But I think there could have been steps taken from the very beginning of this pandemic to prevent our cities from having to do this work of hand over here on a dam to keep it from all falling apart. And so I just wanted you all to know that that's where I am. And even though right now, with this particular vote on COTPA, me voting in favor of this is no indication of what I'm going to do on the 16th. And again, it's not a reflection of Jason and their team. And I love all of my fellow trustees and the work you're doing, but I'm really, this is a struggle for me. And I'll also say this, and I said this on Tuesday, and I know we've talked about it before, and I am very much looking forward to the Regional Transit Authority vote in a few years. But when I say that phrase, in a few years, I'm having such a difficult time knowing that we provide Sunday bus service now. But that was a service that this city had never provided. Private companies did, I learned, when up until 1964-65. They did that. We did not. And I know, and I'm guessing many of you all do as well, because you're transit advocates, that historically across our country, cities defunded bus service directly as a direct result of the Montgomery bus boycotts that Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and Black folk undertook to demand justice and an end to segregation. And unfortunately, when that happened, there were too many folk across the entirety of this country who led efforts to defund public transportation, because in their mind, the people who rode public transportation were Black and they didn't like them. And I hope that this isn't necessarily making folk uncomfortable listening to this, but we just got to be honest about this. And anyone who really digs into the history of public transit knows that this is true. And I'm so proud of the residents of Oklahoma City in the last 10 years, 15 years, who have prioritized public transportation again, who understand that it is a way to connect people to every people of every skin color to the basic needs. But it is not lost on me that our majority ridership happens to be Black, and Black men my age in their 30s who rely on our service to get them to those basic needs so they can take care of themselves and their families. And so my patience in some ways has kind of worn a bit thin, forgive me, the idea that we have not made 15-minute frequency a reality for our people. That I talk about that history of the bus boycott in the 50s and what happened with the lack of Sunday bus service starting around the same time as the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act in 1964-65, the same time that we actually said that Black people and brown people were actually citizens and could vote, something they had not had the luxury to do since our Constitution, since the promise of our Constitution. And so I don't anymore know how much longer I can keep asking people to wait for reliable public transit. And again, Jason and your team, you all have worked, you've made lemonades out of lemon for a very long time. Squeezed the last blood from the last turnip, every metaphor I can think of. So this is not a reflection on you all. But going forward, I'm going to have a very difficult time with any of our city's budgets that does not look at ways to, at least on our routes that have the highest employment and residential density, that we are not doing everything we can to have 15-minute frequency. Councilperson Hammond told a story on Tuesday of a gentleman who, because of the system we have in place, had to transfer multiple times. Took him 3 hours to get to his job. 3 hours. When we were in New York City for the public transit conference, the APTA conference that I have attended every year that I could, except for one since I've been a trustee. When we were there in October and we were staying in Times Square, I walked 3 minutes to a subway stop. I didn't even have to look at the times in anticipation of when the next subway was going to be there, because I knew it would be there every 4 minutes. Didn't matter. And that's the sort of reliability that our people need. They need to know that regardless of when they step out their door, that at the very least, and we know it's an industry standard, at the very least, every 15 minutes, transit is on its way. And again, I applaud our efforts. This is not rhetoric. I applaud our efforts because that's what that bus rapid transit is going to do on Classen in a few years. And those efforts, that can only happen because of the work you all have done in securing that federal grant. But even with that, we're still going to have a bit of a struggle, I am to understand, on how we're going to ensure we fund the operations for BRT. Like, it's really hard. It's really, really hard for me. And I really wanted to share what's on my heart and on my mind in the historical context in which I'm having a very difficult time with this budget right now.
Thank you, James.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I have a little bit more to say on that, Chairman. If you would allow me, please. This is important. This is important all across our country right now. We are having budget conversations about how to reallocate resources to underserved, underrepresented, and marginalized communities. And I want my fellow trustees to just, I don't know, I just want you all to be with me in this moment of understanding how deep this defunding, this unfunding of this service has gone. So so thank you.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Kaufman, aye.
Chairman, we recorded your vote. Councilman Greenwell, would you like to cast a verbal vote? Councilman Greenwell? All right.
All right, thank you. The motion passes. Item H, and I'm to understand we can't put up on the screen, it's a resolution approving the agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 993, retroactive to July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2022, and authorize the administrator to execute the agreement. Jason, any comments? I mean, we had some in the beginning.
Nothing further than what I mentioned previously, unless there are questions from the trustees, and I'm glad to answer them.
All right, no questions. I would have a motion to approve item H.
Sentner moves.
Second. Do I have a second?
This is Laura. I'll second.
All in favor say aye. Kaufman, aye.
Sentner, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Hill, aye.
Ruiz, aye.
All right, that's everybody, I think. So the motion passes.
I don't.
One last.
Here in Cooper or Greenwell vote. Did they vote?
Chairman, would you like me to call the verbal vote for you?
On mine, it's not giving me the option to vote.
Right, so we're voting by voice.
Chairman Kaufman? I'd be happy to
Call the roll.
Okay. Chairman Kaufman, you're A. Vice Chairman Sentner?
Yes. Aye.
Trustee Bryant? I believe he's gone. Trustee Cooper?
Aye.
Trustee Greenwell? Trustee Ruiz?
Aye.
Trustee Hill?
Aye.
Trustee Johnson?
Aye.
The vote passes.
All right, thank you. One last item on our docket is a final acceptance of the public parking garage signs and place maintenance bond in effect. And I think Jason said Corey had a brief presentation, if we can get it on the screen, of our new parking signs.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it over to Corey, and if it's okay with you, he can go ahead and provide his parking report at the same time, which
okay.
Will brief. I'll share the screen now. Okay, here comes Corey.
Good morning, everyone. Our public parking signs, final completion was on May 13th. Public Works, our inspector, myself, architect and contractor were all included. As you've seen the signs, and I'll show you in the presentation, they turned out pretty well. We have begun leaving the lights on during the day, thanks to Trustwell Greenwell's comments and request. In the first image, you can see the Sheridan Walker garage and day and night, followed by the Century Center, day and night. Arts District garage, day and night. And lastly, one of the Cox signs on the west side of the garage. Do we have any questions about item I?
Let's run through that again. I don't think the presentation.
Oh,
We can't see the presentation.
sorry about that.
Go to this one right here.
All right, can we see the screen now? I'm sorry.
Yes.
All right, I'll go back through the pictures. Do we want a narrative again, or do you just want me to scroll through the pictures?
That's fine.
So we're pleased with the work. Do we have any questions about the project and the final acceptance request? Shall I proceed with the rest of the parking report?
Yes.
Chairman, we still need to take the vote for item I. Chairman Kaufman, are you present? Vice Chairman Setner, are you present?
Yes, and so we are calling for a vote on the final acceptance of the public parking garage sign and,
Yes.
and placing a maintenance bond. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please vote on your screen.
I don't know if anybody can vote on the screen, can they?
Well,
Yes.
on your Prime Gov.
Yes.
I vote aye, but I can't.
Yeah, mine says waiting.
Me too.
Oh.
There we go.
There we go.
Trustee Cooper, would you like to vote? Councilman Greenwell?
Motion passes. Thank you. Well, that's all of our items for individual consideration. Next is ratification of claims and payroll. And unless there's any question by the trustees, I'd have a motion to ratify. And I have a second. All in favor say aye or vote. Kaufman, aye. Motion passes. Jason, I don't know if you have any brief comments on our COTPA schedule of revenues and expenditures or budget to actual for the 10 months ending April 30th. But if you've got any brief comments, then that'd be fine.
Just a couple of brief comments. Mr. Chairman, would it be okay with you while we still have the shared screen pulled up that Corey provide a quick update on the convention center parking garage before I make my comments on the financial reports?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, his screen's not shared.
Just a moment.
We're getting it.
Can you see the screen again?
Yes.
Yes.
Quick update on the Scada hardware and software upgrade. All garages minus the Sheridan Walker are complete. We'll start the work on the Sheridan Walker garage. It's going quite well. Couple images of our current garage under construction. Here's a 5th floor aerial of the garage from several weeks ago. Yesterday came in and found out that we went ahead of schedule by 1 day and finished pouring all the parking levels. So 6.5 is what you're seeing being finished up yesterday, sorry. Pleased about that. We've already started on our vehicle barrier walls on the 6th floor. Our southwest staircase is complete, obviously minus the glass and railings, but that was done in 1 day's work, believe it or not. Picture of the northwest staircase, which will be completed today. Installation of the exterior walls or storefront of the new parking operations offices. The offices are expected to be completed in 6 weeks. Elevators are expected to arrive on June 16th with installation beginning the following day. And the horizontal vehicle cables, vehicle barriers, the cables are installations underway. So far, final completion is still 1st of November with final completion in early December. Any questions for me?
Looking good, Corey. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Jason, any brief comments on the budget?
Yes, sir. Just a few comments. My comments are going to be consistent with really what we had talked about last month in terms of really beginning to see the impact on our revenues, both on the parking side and the transit side here on the April financials. So just letting you know that if you want to start on page 2 of your budget to actual under transportation operations, our fare box revenue is about 84% of what we had estimated. We have a negative variance of 200,000 on our fare box revenue. On our past sales, a negative variance of 59,000. And so again, it's not unexpected due to our change in the way we're operating our system with rear door boarding, not accepting cash payments at the fare box, and of course, reduced frequency and reduced ridership. A couple things to be looking for into the future on our budget to actuals with regards to transportation operations. We do not anticipate being able to take any more of our general fund subsidy this year. So where you see through the 10 months ending, we've drawn about 14.8 million of general fund subsidy. We will no longer be able to take any general fund transfer, and instead we will be substituting CARES Act funding to help offset the operation costs through the remainder of the year. So that's just a couple of things to be aware of. And then as I'd mentioned earlier, although you see a positive variance on expenditures, positive meaning to the good, we're under budget on expenditures through 10 months by about $1 million. A lot of that savings, particularly in the personal services category, you're going to see that go away with the approval of the collective bargaining agreement. I'm going to go ahead and skip over to parking on page 4. And again, just discuss a couple of revenue items that we're looking at very closely and that we use to build our budget for next year. Monthly contract parking, you can see it's 287,000 under budget. Now, as a reminder, we were tracking about 20,000 less in revenue each month, even before the current state of emergency. So we were not performing to budget on that to begin with. So we expected a variance of somewhere around 220 to 240,000 under budget. But where we've really seen an impact due to COVID is on the events. We took in no event revenue in April. And so that's the largest contributing factor to our event revenue, showing $276,000 under budget. Now, with that said, again, if I can just direct your attention to the operating income line on the budget to actual, even with those negative variances, we're still, through 10 months of the fiscal year, $1 million to the good. So our revenues are still in excess of our expenditures by $1 million. We do expect, obviously, as we finish up the last 2 months of the fiscal year, for that surplus to decrease, but we will still likely finish the year with a surplus on the parking system. And I think that will conclude my comments, Mr. Chairman, and unless trustees have any questions on any of the other financials or anything I've discussed.
All right, any questions of Jason?
Jason? Thank you, Chairman. Jason, again, just going back to what I was saying earlier, I'm very happy with the way you and your team are managing these CARES Act funds and thinking so responsibly as stewards for the next couple of years. What happens in a couple of years? I guess one of my grave concerns is 2 years from now, when we don't have some of that CARES Act funding or maybe any of it, and this $9 million in terms of coming out of the general fund. My worry is restoration. Is that we go back in some ways from where we've been in the last 15 years. We've had such an incredible forward movement because of your team's hard work and the support you've had from folk like Assistant City Manager Laura Johnson and the trustees. My concern is what happens in 2 or 3 years, and what are conversations like that with other transit agencies across the country?
Yeah, so I think collectively all share those same concerns. That certainly is a reality. And yeah, I mean, the main reason we're able to preserve our bus operations in particular is because we are able to leverage that CARES funding to offset the cost of our operations. And of the $24 million in CARES funding that really came to Oklahoma City for transit, we do have a 2-year plan to spend $9 million of that over the next 2 years. As I mentioned, we're already going to be using some of the CARES funding to get through this fiscal year with general fund revenues coming in under budget. So the way I look at it is I share those same concerns. The CARES funding essentially buys us time. And what does it buy us time for? It buys us time for the economy to recover and for revenues to get back up to pre-COVID levels. And if that's the case, then I think it, of course, comes down to a policy decision of how the rebound or the recoup of those revenues are allocated. Ideally, the transit system could be made whole, but obviously there's no guarantee of that in the future. And worst case scenario, 2 years from now, we could be looking at having to make some difficult decisions if one, revenues don't come back like, we're hoping they do over the next 2 years, or for some reason revenues are returned to pre-COVID levels and they're not allocated to transit. But I mean, that's just the reality of where we're at. So we do not cannot sit here today and say it's smooth sailing from here on out, and the CARES Act is going to help us stay whole for 2 years, because we're going to have probably some tough decisions to make 2 years from now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and you had asked about the industry as a whole, and I'm on a weekly call through the American Public Transit Association that transit managers are involved in. And, different thing about transit is, different communities have different funding sources. But even those transit agencies with dedicated funding are basically experiencing the same thing we are, in that they rely on that sales tax to pay their bills, just like we do sales tax coming into the general fund, and then the general fund provides it to us. And so most transit agencies, again, are using the CARES Act funding for the same purposes we are, whether in part or in entirety, to supplement operations costs.
What are updates right now? I remember when they were, I remember APTA, back, it's all a blur, but before the first relief package, I remember they were doing outreach to advocates across the country and to systems across the country, and saying, hey, this is what we're needing. And I remember reaching out to our federal lobbyists and being like, hey, you have my support. Let our congressional delegation from Oklahoma know. Do we know are there any specific asks at this moment from APTA in terms of this next Corona relief package, and how might I or anyone watching, listening, or any of the other trustees be of assistance?
Well, I could say, generally APTA, our association, is of course in support of any additional funding, to help secure transit now and into the future. And I know they're actively lobbying to demonstrate the value of transit. What I do know is that the last, I think, serious piece of legislation that was being considered, and things could have changed in the last week, there was some consideration for additional funding for transit. However, I'd say nearly all of that funding was looking to be going to, I believe, communities or cities with populations, I believe it was in excess of 500,000. But basically what it boiled down to is most of the funds going to the 14 largest systems in the country. So in terms of what anyone listening that is interested in supporting transit in Oklahoma City could do, and what we're interested in doing and having communications with our federal lobbyists about, is trying to convey that that doesn't necessarily help Oklahoma City. I do know that the legislation had some funding available that transit agencies could compete for if they, it is basically a demonstration of need. But, when I think of our city in particular, and we know this from our customer service surveys, I would argue that Oklahoma City might be, one of the cities with that higher transit dependent customer base, right? And so, whereas a larger municipality, their ridership might be comprised of more commuters that have a choice. And again, not to put any agency against another or size, but I do think we could certainly demonstrate a need, at least percentage wise, of the amount of customers we have that are transit dependent, and without the transit system, how do they get to work? How do they get to school? How do they get to medical appointments? They may not have that option of a vehicle like, let's say, a typical commuter in a larger city might have. So that's really where I'm at, is hopefully any additional funding that comes to support transit really accounts for the medium size and even small size agencies as well. And I think hopefully that's the message we can get across.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. I think what I can do is I'm happy to draft a letter of support of that approach. And I can ask our council staff to maybe arrange a phone call between myself and the federal lobbyists to let them know that letter is en route. And if you have any, I'd be happy to share the letter with you before I send it off, make sure it is hitting what you all see as our needs, because you're going to know it a little bit better than I am. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And I'll talk to Debbie Martin today. But I really appreciate that perspective, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions of Jason? Then I have a motion to receive our financial reports. Do I have a motion? I guess we'll do it verbally.
Move approval.
Second?
I'll-
Is that a second?
Yeah, Barney will second.
All in favor? I guess verbally say aye. Kaufman, aye.
Sempner, aye.
You need to do a roll call.
Yeah, Lisa, can you
I
do,
will, yes, I will do a roll call. Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Sempner,
Aye.
Trustee Bryant, Trustee Cooper,
Aye.
Trustee Greenwell, Trustee Ruiz,
Aye.
Trustee Hill,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson.
aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Jason, do we have a transit system report or are we finished with the reports?
We did not have a presentation for the trust. The transit system report is included in the packet. I mean, I'm happy to, make some comments on it if you'd like. Essentially, you'll see really the story with the transit system report is we were having a very solid year in terms of ridership, particularly on the bus side. Actually, beginning to exceed last year's ridership, of course, until, March and April hit. So, I mean, I'm glad to answer any questions, but basically, April ridership was down significantly across all transportation modes, and the graphs indicate such. With that, I guess with that said, though, this is the data through April. Looking into May and even into June, where some of the restrictions have been lifted, we have actually seen our ridership increase pretty significantly. We're now this week, well over 5,000 trips a day on the bus side, and with return to normal service hours and service span this Sunday, we would expect that ridership to continue to increase.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Then I guess we need a motion, which we have a motion and a second to receive our program reports. Roll call.
Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sempner, I see that you voted yay. Trustee Bryan, I see you voted yay. Trustee Cooper,
Yay.
Trustee Greenwell, absent. Trustee Ruiz, I see that you voted yay. Trustee Hill, I see you voted yay. And Trustee Johnson, I see you voted yay.
All right.
The motion passes.
Motion passes. All right. Any items from any of the trustees before we adjourn our meeting?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would just like to say that how much I commend Jason and the entire Embark team, because this has truly been an effort from everyone, from every single mechanic and bus driver and customer service rep and paratransit operator, all the way through the administration, to come through this very difficult time with the virus. It's a situation that we really didn't have any kind of template to work from. We've worked a lot of emergencies here in Oklahoma City, fires, floods, tornadoes, other pestilence, disaster, but we didn't have anything like this COVID-19 emergency to deal with. And they immediately implemented plans and protocols to protect their employees, their customers, and whatever service level they could continue to have. on top of that, to have the kind of economic situation to deal with that we're looking at for our budget, and to come up with ways, thankfully somewhat supported by the federal government, but ways to continue to support the service levels for our most dependent customers. It's just really admirable. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone associated with Embark.
Laura, thank you for those positive comments. I second it. I think they've done a remarkable job during this period of time. And coming out of it, we'll get back to normal service, and hopefully we can improve our service. So,
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to echo your remarks and Laura's remarks. And I also want to say thank you to Jason and Jesse and the folk who joined our virtual town hall that Councilperson Nice and Councilperson Hammond held recently. I think it was a Tuesday after council, and just hearing from the operators, hearing from the folk who are doing the just incredible attention to cleaning our equipment. It's you all are just doing incredible. I hope that those words do not just come across as rhetoric. I am just so impressed. I'm so proud of you all. I've always been proud of you all since I first joined. And it's just been my honor to serve. And I don't know if Mayor Cornett watches any of this. I don't know where he's at these days when it comes to COTPA, but if he is hearing this, just really want to say thank you for the opportunity to serve. You all have taught me so much. And I'm just so proud of what you all have done in this moment. And thank you for joining us that day, Jason. Pass it along to your team.
all right, thank you. No other items, then I would have a motion to adjourn, or I would just say we're adjourned. So sorry for some of the complications we've had, but we got through it. And maybe we'll get back to normal for a coming meeting sometime. So thank you all for your patience.
Thank you.